She was 30, he was 72, they slept in the same bed. He said she made him feel alive again. Days later, he was found stabbed to death alone, in his kitchen. Everyone thought it was love, it wasn't, it was preparation. Welcome back to Truth in Shadows, truly grateful to have you here. If you're ready, let's begin. At first, Walter only noticed the softer footsteps in the hallway, the gentle clink of dishes being arranged with care. The house that had echoed with silence for over a decade now breathed with quiet motion. Sofia didn't enter his life like a storm. She arrived like fog, gradual, quiet, and everywhere before he realized it. She greeted him with a smile that never reached her eyes, though Walter didn't see that. He saw the kindness, the energy, the way her hair caught the afternoon sun through the kitchen window. Sofia didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. She moved through his house with respect, like she understood it was a museum of his life. Walter liked that. He liked that she folded his towels in a new way. He liked the smell of lemon on the counter. He liked that someone was there when he came downstairs in the morning. In the first few weeks, they barely spoke beyond simple pleasantries. But Walter began to find excuses, small ones, to keep her a little longer. "I made too much tea," he'd say. Or, "This book reminded me of something from my past." She'd sit across from him at the small kitchen table, legs crossed, hands folded, listening like his words were precious. She never interrupted. Never corrected. She laughed at all the right places, leaned forward when his voice dropped. It had been so long since someone leaned forward just to hear him better. Time stretched in strange ways. A week felt like a day. Her visits turned from once a week to twice, then more. By March, she arrived with her hair tied up casually, in soft clothes, looking more at ease than most guests had ever dared in that house. Walter never asked about her husband. She never offered the topic. It hung between them like a framed picture turned toward the wall, present, but not for display. One Thursday afternoon, it rained. Sofia forgot her coat. Walter offered her one of his old cardigans, far too big for her frame. She wrapped it around her like a blanket, and he watched her stir sugar into her tea, sleeves trailing like curtains. That night, she stayed late. He insisted she sleep in the guest room. She nodded. In the morning, she was still there, making toast like it was always her kitchen. It didn't happen all at once, but somewhere between April and June, Walter began to feel younger. His knees still ached, and his memory still faltered sometimes, but his heart no longer felt like a clock winding down. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't see an old man. He saw someone who still had something left to give. Sofia started leaving little things behind. A hairbrush in the bathroom. A pair of earrings on the dresser. She began rearranging the kitchen drawers, saying it made more sense her way. Walter didn't mind. He liked the feeling of change, even if it unsettled the stillness he'd grown used to. The quiet of the house was no longer peaceful, it had become a void, and Sofia filled it. There was a day in July when Walter came home from a dentist appointment and found her napping on his couch, barefoot, curled up under one of his old blankets. The television was on, low, playing a show he didn't recognize. He stood there for a full minute, just watching. In that moment, he felt like he'd stumbled into a different life, one where he hadn't been left behind by time. He bought her a necklace the next week. Nothing extravagant, but enough to sparkle when the light hit it right. She thanked him with a kiss on the cheek, soft and quick, but her eyes lingered on the gift more than on him. Still, he smiled all the way through dinner. The first time she touched his back just briefly, her hand warm through the fabric of his shirt, he felt his breath catch. It was accidental, he told himself. A gesture of thanks. But the next time, it wasn't accidental. Her hands were firm, confident, pressing into the muscles between his shoulders. He hadn't been touched like that in years. Not out of obligation or pity, but as if someone saw him as a person still deserving of care. She started sleeping in his room in late summer. No announcement. No conversation. One night she simply followed him upstairs and didn't stop at the guest room. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Her body against his in the dark felt less like a transaction and more like a miracle. He began changing his routines. Waking up earlier to make her coffee. Cooking dinner again, something he hadn't done in a decade. He even considered taking her on a trip, somewhere warm. The thought of airports, crowds, delays, none of it bothered him. She made things feel possible again. He noticed her gaze sometimes lingered too long on the edge of her phone screen, like she was waiting for a message that never came. He noticed how she excused herself to the patio when she answered calls. But he didn't ask. He didn't want to disturb whatever delicate balance they had created. Walter started giving her cash. Small amounts, then larger ones. For groceries, gas, small indulgences. She always looked reluctant at first, but accepted it with a sigh, like she didn't want to burden him but had no choice. He told himself he was helping her, that she deserved a little ease in her life. After all, wasn't that what love did? It gave. The neighbors began to notice, though they never said anything directly. One woman across the street asked casually if his niece was visiting often. Walter just smiled. The truth felt too fragile to explain. Autumn came, and with it, a new softness in the air. Sofia started wearing his sweaters. She said it was because they were cozy. He thought it was because she wanted to feel close to him. She began suggesting small changes to the house, a new color for the dining room, a different set of curtains. Walter agreed to all of it. Her presence had become the background music of his life. Without it, the silence felt louder than ever. She surprised him one morning with breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee, just the way he liked it. She said she wanted to thank him for everything. He tried to reply but couldn't find the right words. Instead, he watched her move through the kitchen like it belonged to her, like it always had. And yet, despite everything, there were moments, tiny, fleeting moments, when something in her expression would shift. A faraway look, a tightening around her mouth, a pause that lingered too long. He chalked it up to stress. She said little about her past, even less about her husband. When she did speak of her life before Ravenhill, it was vague, like smoke you couldn't hold. One evening, they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets. The sky was darkening, and a light wind stirred the trees. Walter turned to her and said, "I'm glad you're here." She smiled, but her eyes didn't smile with her. In that quiet moment, there was something unsettling beneath the peace. A silence not born of comfort, but of calculation. Still, he dismissed the thought. Love had made him blind before, but this felt different. This felt earned. He told himself that even if it wasn't perfect, it was real. Later that night, she fell asleep first. He lay beside her, listening to her breath. There was warmth, closeness, the gentle rhythm of another life next to his. And yet, something inside him stirred an unease he couldn't name. The room was dark. The air still. Sofia shifted in her sleep, turning away from him. For a moment, the space between them felt like a canyon. But Walter reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. She didn't pull away. Outside, wind brushed the windows. A peaceful sound. Or maybe a warning in disguise. Some shadows don't need to move to be felt. Some warmth is just a fire waiting to die. It began with a missed celebration. For 12 years, Walter had never once forgotten his best friend's birthday. Each June, they met for steak and red wine, a quiet ritual between two old men who had weathered the years together. But this time, Walter didn't show up. He called that morning, his voice low and distant, saying Sofia wasn't feeling well and he didn't want to leave her alone. His friend said it was fine. But later, he would remember the strange tone in Walter's voice. Not concern. Not love. Something thinner. Something that sounded more like fear dressed up as devotion. Inside the house, things had shifted. Sofia no longer knocked before entering. She no longer asked before taking the car. She stayed late into the night, even on days she wasn't supposed to be there. She started rearranging not just furniture, but Walter's time, his appointments, his grocery list, his schedule for calls. She claimed she was helping, but the help came with soft commands. Don't go out today. You need rest. Or, I already answered your phone. It wasn't important. Each word was gentle. Each tone, soothing. And yet, each one placed a brick around him. Quiet walls built from care. By July, her presence filled the house in strange ways. Her clothes began appearing in his drawers. Her shoes lined up next to his by the front door. One afternoon, Walter walked into the bathroom and found her makeup scattered across the counter, as if she had always lived there. She laughed and said, "I hope you don't mind," and kissed his cheek before he could respond. He never saw her husband. Not once. She said he had left town for work. Then she said he might not be coming back. Then she stopped mentioning him at all. But the night Sofia spent away never came with clear explanations. She said she was staying with a cousin. Then she said she needed space. Then nothing at all. Walter waited up with the light on, watching shadows stretch across the ceiling. When she returned in the morning, she smelled like new perfume and unfamiliar air. He didn't ask where she'd been. Instead, he made her coffee. His silence was the price he paid for her return. What Walter didn't know, what no one knew, was that those nights away were not spent in solitude. Sofia had found someone else. Someone younger. Someone who looked at her like she was still 20 and the world was waiting. His name was Liam Brooks. A bartender. 22. Sharp jawline. Tattoos under his sleeves. He called her Sophie, and she let him. They met in hotel rooms with velvet curtains and dim lights. Places that charged by the night but looked like dreams. She brought him gifts, new shoes, watches, jackets he wore half-zipped. She paid for everything. He never reached for the bill. She didn't mind. She liked the way he looked in things she bought. The money came from Walter. At first, it was small amounts. Then larger ones. He didn't notice because he trusted her. And when he did see a charge he didn't understand, a boutique he never heard of, a restaurant he hadn't visited, she'd laugh and say, "I forgot to use my card." He would smile and wave it off. The way you wave away something you don't want to believe. One day, he found a man's jacket in her car. The tag still attached. A size he never wore. She said it was her brother's. He looked at her, then at the jacket, and said nothing. He placed it back where he found it and closed the door. Sofia didn't flinch. But something inside Walter stirred. Still, he didn't confront her. Instead, he buried it beneath politeness, beneath habit, beneath the aching need to keep her beside him. Then came the news. One quiet evening in late summer, as they sat watching the rain tap against the window pane, she turned to him and whispered, "I think I'm pregnant." The words landed like a stone in his chest. His breath caught, not from fear, but from wonder. At 72, he had never imagined he might be a father. The thought was absurd. But in her eyes, he saw hope, not hesitation. He asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded, her hand brushing over her stomach. In the days that followed, Walter moved as if in a dream. He began talking about the future. About names. About nursery colors. He mentioned seeing a lawyer. He wanted Sofia to feel secure. He wanted the child if there was one to have everything. He began drafting notes for changes to his will. He even asked a friend for advice about setting up a trust fund. The friend raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Walter spoke with such softness, such quiet conviction, it felt almost sacred. But the signs began to crack through the surface. She never mentioned doctor visits. When he offered to go with her, she smiled and said, "It's too early." When he asked about morning sickness, she changed the subject. When he bought prenatal vitamins, they remained unopened on the kitchen shelf. He wanted to believe her. He needed to. Then one afternoon, while dusting the hallway bookshelf, Walter noticed something odd. The trash had been taken out, but the bathroom bin was still full. Inside were wrappers, receipts, and a test box unopened. He stared at it for a long time, the silence around him pressing in like a blanket too heavy to lift. That evening, he asked her gently, "When will we hear the heartbeat?" She looked at him with wide eyes, then down at her hands. Her voice was low when she replied, "I lost the baby." She didn't cry. Not even once. But Walter did. He wept in the living room, face buried in his palms, shoulders shaking under the weight of something he couldn't name. It wasn't just grief, it was shame. For believing. For hoping. For handing over his heart so willingly, only to feel it fall through fingers that never truly held it. Sofia sat beside him. She wrapped her arm around his shoulder, pressed her cheek to his. Her voice was soft, steady. She whispered, "I'm here." Her hand rested on his back, unmoving. Calm. Her breath was even. She didn't wipe his tears, but let them fall. There was no tremble in her touch. No crack in her voice. Just quiet. Like the moment before glass shatters. Outside, the wind stirred leaves into tiny whirlpools. The house creaked not from age, but as if reacting. Listening. Holding its breath. In the days that followed, Sofia stayed close. She made his favorite meals. She watched old movies with him, head on his shoulder. She kissed his forehead at night and whispered promises he clung to like a lifeline. But in the mirror, Walter no longer saw a man reborn. He saw a man unraveling, slowly, thread by thread. Love, he realized, could also be a weapon. And sometimes, the most dangerous wounds came wrapped in comfort. Not every lie is loud. Some wear silk and smell like lavender. On the morning of December 10th, Walter stood at the edge of his bedroom window, the winter light cutting pale shapes across the floor. His breath left faint fog on the glass as he watched the trees sway without urgency. He had not slept well the night before. The silence beside him in bed had not comforted him this time. It felt hollow, echoing, like something had slipped away in the dark. He wore a wool coat that hadn't left the closet in years. The sleeves were too loose around his arms now, but the weight was reassuring. He didn't tell Sofia where he was going. Just said he had errands. She kissed his cheek. Her lips were warm, her eyes calm. But that calm no longer soothed him. It unsettled him, like the surface of water that hides something moving underneath. The lawyer's office was dim, paneled in dark wood, with a ticking clock that marked each second with quiet judgment. Walter sat across the desk, hands folded, voice steady. He didn't explain much. Just said he needed a few adjustments. The joint account he wanted her name removed. The changes to the will he wanted them cancelled. No anger in his tone. No bitterness. Only resolve. The lawyer raised an eyebrow, said nothing, and began typing. Walter left with a folder under his arm. The sky outside had turned gray, heavy with snow that had not yet fallen. He looked up, just for a moment. The cold brushed against his face like a whisper. Something invisible shifting. That evening, he made dinner. Roasted chicken. Mashed potatoes. Red wine. He set the table for two. The plates, the glasses, the folded napkins, everything arranged carefully, deliberately. When Sofia arrived, she smelled of cinnamon and cold air. She smiled. He returned the gesture, though his face felt stiff when he did. They ate in near silence at first. The sound of the fork against porcelain was louder than their breathing. Then, Walter cleared his throat and looked at her. His eyes did not waver. "I want to ask you something," he said. She glanced up, still chewing, then nodded. "The charges on the credit card," he continued. "The hotels. The men's clothing. The gifts that never arrived here." She placed her fork down, gently, as if afraid to disturb the table. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her fingers traced the edge of her glass. The pause was too long. Finally, she said, "I was trying to make things easier for myself. I didn't want to burden you." Walter stared at her. "I need the truth." She looked away. Then back. Her voice softened. "I'm not perfect. But I care for you. I didn't mean to hurt you." There it was again, that voice like warm water, wrapping around sharp stones. Walter wanted to believe it. Wanted to forget the papers in his folder, the receipts hidden in drawers, the jacket that wasn't his. Instead, he nodded. Slowly. The way a man nods, not because he believes, but because he's tired of doubt. Forgiveness came not as a gift, but as surrender. That night, they sat together on the couch. She leaned against him. His arm went around her shoulders. The television played an old movie neither of them were watching. Walter's eyes drifted to the reflection in the darkened window, two figures, close together, framed by shadows. It looked peaceful. But something about it felt like a painting hung in the wrong house. December 13th arrived cold and quiet. Walter called a locksmith. The man came mid-morning, wearing gloves and a cheerful smile. They spoke little. The locks were changed in under an hour. Walter paid in cash. No receipt. He stood in the hallway after the van pulled away, staring at the new brass knobs. His hand hovered over one, testing its coldness. There was no one to tell. No one he wanted to explain this to. The house was still. The air, untouched. But somewhere beyond the walls, something had already noticed. That same afternoon, Sofia didn't call. She didn't text. That night, the silence stretched long, as if the house itself was listening, waiting. The weekend passed like fog rolling across a frozen field. Walter moved through the rooms quietly, turning on lights he didn't need, warming meals he didn't eat. Every small sound made him pause. The creak of a stair. The shift of the wind outside. He kept checking his phone. It remained silent. By Sunday morning, he began to believe it might be over. Perhaps she had realized something was different. Perhaps she had chosen to walk away. There was relief in that thought, but it came wrapped in grief. Letting go of her meant letting go of everything she had awakened in him: joy, desire, purpose. Even if it had all been an illusion, it had still felt real. On December 15th, the knock came. It was soft. Deliberate. Not urgent, not desperate, just steady. Walter stood in the hallway, frozen. His hand tightened around the edge of the wall. Then, slowly, he moved toward the door. When he opened it, Sofia stood in the pale light of late afternoon. Her coat was buttoned up to her neck. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. She was holding nothing. She smiled. He stepped aside, and she walked in. There was no anger in her eyes. No confrontation in her posture. She looked around the house like someone returning from a trip, not someone who had vanished for days. He offered tea. She accepted. They stood in the kitchen as the kettle hissed, the steam rising between them like breath from a sleeping animal. Walter's hands shook slightly as he poured. He tried to hide it. She said nothing. He handed her a cup. Their fingers brushed. Her touch was warm, steady. She took a sip, closed her eyes, and smiled again. He wanted to ask where she had been. He wanted to ask what she wanted. But the words stuck. Not from fear. From something stranger, hope, maybe. The last stubborn branch clinging to a dying tree. They sat at the table, facing each other. The air was thick with silence, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that hummed under the surface, waiting to crack open. I never stopped believing in you, Walter said softly. Sofia didn't respond. Her gaze lowered, then lifted, meeting his eyes like a curtain slowly rising. Her face held no expression. For a moment, everything stilled. The room, the light, even time itself. And then she smiled again. It was not a smile of joy or relief or even affection. It was a smile you wear before you turn off a light in a room you'll never enter again. Some knocks don't ask permission. They announce an ending. At 7:45 p.m., the street outside was still. The kind of stillness that comes when cold air settles over a neighborhood and everyone stays indoors. Windows glowed softly with television light. A dog barked once, then stopped. Nothing unusual. Just another quiet evening in Ravenhill. Inside Walter's house, a soft knock broke the silence. He was in the living room, sitting in his favorite chair, the one with the worn armrests and the cushion shaped by years of use. The sound of the knock didn't startle him. He had been expecting it. He stood slowly, his knees stiff, and made his way to the front door. When he opened it, Sofia stood under the porch light. Her hair was pulled back neatly. No makeup. No purse. Just her and the pale glow of the light painting soft shadows on her face. She smiled like someone greeting an old friend. Walter stepped aside. She walked in without a word. Her coat was dusted with frost. He closed the door behind her, careful to lock it. Habit, not meaning. He asked if she wanted tea. She nodded. In the kitchen, the kettle whistled faintly. Walter moved with the slow care of someone trying not to spill anything, his age showing in his movements. Sofia leaned against the counter, silent, watching. Her eyes didn't blink as often as they should. There was no tension in her body, but no warmth either. Just stillness, measured and exact. He placed 2 mugs on the counter and reached into the cabinet for her favorite tea, the kind with cinnamon and orange peel. She had once said it reminded her of holidays. Of home. He poured the hot water and stirred slowly, the spoons clinking in a rhythm too calm for what was coming. I never stopped believing in you, he said, his back still turned. There was no reply. He turned around, holding both mugs, steam rising between them like a thin curtain. Sofia had moved closer, almost too close. Her hands were not at her sides. One was tucked behind her back. Her eyes didn't meet his. They were somewhere else, looking past him, or through him, as if he were no longer a person but an obstacle to be removed gently. The knife was not large. Just an ordinary kitchen knife. Stainless steel. It came from his own drawer. She hadn't brought anything with her. She hadn't needed to. He opened his mouth to ask something, but never got the words out. The first motion was quick. Clean. A movement so smooth it didn't look violent at all, more like someone slicing a ribbon at a ceremony. The second followed before he could speak. The third came with no pause, no emotion, no hesitation. Her grip was firm, her breathing even. The room smelled like tea and metal. Walter's hands let go of the mugs. One shattered. The other rolled on the floor, spilling its warmth across the tiles. He took a step back, then another, eyes wide, breath short. His body leaned against the fridge, slid down, and came to rest beside it. He didn't scream. He didn't have time to. Sofia crouched beside him, looking at his face, searching for something, fear, maybe understanding. But whatever she saw didn't move her. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small cloth. With precise movements, she wiped the handle of the knife. No shaking in her fingers. No blood on her clothes. She had worn gloves. White ones. She stood, adjusted her coat, and looked around the kitchen once more. Nothing out of place except the cooling cup on the floor and the man slumped beside the fridge. She walked to the sink, rinsed the cloth, wrung it dry, and placed it in her pocket. Then, with quiet steps, she walked to the side door, opened it slowly, and disappeared into the cold. The house swallowed the silence. No alarms. No sirens. Only the slow drip of tea pooling near broken porcelain and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Outside, snow began to fall, thin flakes, carried by wind too gentle to make noise. By morning, the neighborhood stirred awake. Car engines coughed. Lights flickered on. A jogger passed by the front of Walter's house and noticed nothing odd. It wasn't until 9:12 a.m. that someone knocked again. This time, it was Mr. Heller, Walter's oldest friend. They had planned breakfast together. He had brought pastries in a brown paper bag. When no one answered, he frowned. He knocked again, then tried the door. It was unlocked. The warmth inside hit him first. Then the silence. He called out Walter's name once. Then twice. When he stepped into the kitchen, he dropped the bag. Later, he wouldn't remember what he screamed. Only that it echoed. Some endings don't roar. They just close the door quietly behind them. The investigation began before the sun had fully risen. Yellow tape wrapped around the house like a warning written in silence. Officers moved carefully through the rooms, speaking in low voices, as if louder words might disturb something fragile left behind. The kitchen, where the stillness clung like a second skin, gave them their first answer. No signs of struggle. No broken locks. No forced entry. Whoever had done this had been welcomed in. Detectives reviewed security footage from the nearby intersections and home cameras. The front door showed her arriving. Calm. Confident. No hesitation. But there was no footage of her leaving through it. She had taken the side door, the one Walter rarely used, the one hidden behind hedges that no longer bloomed in winter. Her exit was silent. Clean. Measured. Like she had rehearsed it. The knife was found washed and returned to its place in the drawer. A subtle erasure, more intimate than hiding it. Like wiping away fingerprints from a family portrait. But the house itself spoke. In its still corners, in the echoes that clung to staircases, in the unfinished tea on the floor. The kind of evidence only time can interpret. It took 3 days to find her. A motel off a quiet highway, 60 miles from Ravenhill. Cheap curtains. Faded carpet. One suitcase, half-zipped. She didn't resist. She opened the door, saw the badge, and simply raised her hands. No tears. No confusion. Just a look that said she knew this moment had always been coming. Liam was not with her. The motel clerk said she checked in alone. Paid in cash. Barely spoke. Sometimes walked to the vending machine and stood there for several minutes, staring at the snacks without choosing. The maid said the room was too clean. No trash. No mess. The bed barely used. At the station, they went through her phone. Among the apps and contacts, they found messages to Liam. Not dozens, just a few. Short. Direct. And cold. The one that made the room fall silent read, "When it's done, it's just us." But Liam had never replied. He hadn't answered any of her messages after the first week of December. He had stopped visiting the hotels. Stopped accepting the gifts. His silence was not betrayal, it was distance. And it had come too late. They brought him in. He didn't try to hide. Sat across the table from the detectives, arms crossed, jaw tight. He said he knew about Walter. Said he thought it was a game. A way to feel wanted. I didn't think she was serious, he said, eyes shifting. She said she wanted to end things, but I thought she meant leaving him. Not this. The words hung in the air, limp and empty. The officers didn't respond. They didn't need to. The truth was written between the pauses. In court, Sofia didn't look at anyone. She stood straight, hands at her sides, face calm. No outburst. No breakdown. When asked for her plea, she said guilty without blinking. Her lawyer didn't argue. No trial. No defense. Just one sentence, life without parole. Liam testified with dry lips and a hoarse voice. He avoided Sofia's eyes the entire time. His words were slow, careful, shaped by fear of implication. When the judge handed down his sentence, 20 years for conspiracy and withholding information, he nodded. Not in agreement, but in acceptance. Like a man who finally realized the weight of silence. Outside the courthouse, news vans gathered. Reporters with too much makeup and too little sleep tried to summarize the story in 30-second bursts. But the real story couldn't be captured in sound bites. It was too quiet. Too personal. It lived in the in-between spaces, the touch on a shoulder, the late-night cups of tea, the whispered promises in a dim hallway. Walter's friends gathered days later. They sat in his living room, surrounded by books he had loved, furniture he had polished, photographs that had never been moved. None of them cried out loud. Instead, they looked at the empty chair and spoke in fragments. Memories. Regrets. The strange ache of knowing someone better after they're gone. One friend said the house felt colder now. Another said the light came through the windows differently. A third swore the floorboards creaked at night in a way they never had before. No one talked about ghosts. But everyone felt them. Not the kind that rattle chains or flicker lights. The kind made of questions. How much did he know? When did he stop believing? And why did he let her in? They say closure comes with justice. But in Ravenhill, justice arrived with too many shadows. The town moved on, slowly. The snow melted. Flowers returned. People stopped pointing at the house. But the silence inside never left. A new couple visited once, thinking about buying it. They stayed 15 minutes. Didn't finish the tour. The agent never got a call back. Sofia never spoke to the press. Never wrote letters. Her name faded from headlines but stayed in conversations whispered late at night, when people asked how something like this could happen in a place so quiet. Liam, from inside his cell, tried to write a book. A memoir, maybe. But after 20 pages, he stopped. The words felt dishonest. He told the prison counselor he couldn't decide if he was a victim or a villain. The counselor said it didn't matter anymore. And Walter? He was buried under a tall oak, in a plot with no other names. The inscription was simple. His name. His years. And one line, he gave everything. But those who knew him said the real tribute was the silence he left behind. Some stories end with a bang. Others echo. Walter Green gave someone everything. Sofia Alvarez took what she wanted, then left him with nothing, not even breath. It wasn't love. It was convenience. And for that, a man died alone in his own home. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts below. And remember, not every smile means safety. Some just mean preparation.